9mm versus 45. 9mm versus 45 is definitely one of those sort of like cornerstone debates in the gun world that never really seem to resolve, like AK versus AR, 45 versus 9mm. There's a couple of them that just are like eternal. They never really end. Realistically, in especially modern days, most people agree this is my Glock 45 chambered in 9mm. I'm using it as a placeholder for 9mm. Most people nowadays would agree that 9mm really has overtaken the XD, the 45. This is the XDM 45, also my placeholder for 45. Most people would agree, yes, it's unloaded. Most people would agree nowadays that the 9mm really has overtaken the 45. The biggest evidence of this is 9mm is more common. Just flat out, not even a comparison these days. 9mm is by far and away the more common caliber. And there's a lot of merits for why it's better than 45. There are some merits for why 40. Please don't. There are some merits for why 45 can overshade the 9mm in some areas. I'm not trying to make it. Okay. I'm not trying to make a video going over entirely 9 versus 45, although I've thought of it. This is really specifically focusing in on recoil between the 9mm and the 45. Now, I came up with this wonderful target here. It's very complicated, I'm sure you can tell. Every 1 inch, there's a line. So this test of 9mm versus 45, pretty straightforward, really. I'm going to go hit the range, and I'm going to compare my Glock 45, in 9mm with my Springfield, not mine, but I'm working on a review of it, the Springfield XDM 45, and we're going to compare them side by side. I'm going to use my super slow-mo camera on one of my phones, camera slash phone. Basically, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to try and measure using editing and super slow-mo and everything where the barrel starts in recoil and where it raises up, and I'm going to try and see how many inches roughly each one of these guns go in recoil. Now, some disclaimers, obviously. The first one being, they're not the same gun. They weigh differently, different springs, different recoil systems, all that. This is never going to be a straight one-to-one comparison, obviously. So take this with a grain of salt, I think. They weigh differently. They're going to recoil slightly differently. But they're both full-size, sort of like duty-size handguns. I'm using as close as I can get to the same ammo, which is going to be for 9mm, 115 grain Tula. For the 45, 230 grain Tula. So I tried to get it fairly sort of similar between the two. There's going to be some discrepancies, obviously. So, but let's go ahead and hit the range, and using my little recoil target here, try and see how each one of them compare and stack up. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little slow-mo session. I hope you enjoyed it, because it took a lot more behind the scenes than I would have expected, considering I had to take multiple shots to figure out like what kind of gap in between each shot I needed for the slow-mo to pick it up. Then I had to go through and edit it. But moral of the story, I got it done. what were the results? Well, the 9mm on average, there was a couple that were outliers, but for the most part, 9mm recoiled about 2 inches, XDM roughly 3 inches. So, shocking, I'm sure to most of you, the 45 recoils more than 9mm. It's shocking. No, that's actually pretty much what everyone was expecting, let's be honest. All things being equal, and these are roughly equal-ish, the 45 is going to recoil more. But this test does prove that while the 45, in my opinion, Sucha said this in some of his videos, and I agree with it, the 45 seems to recoil almost slower and harder versus the 9, which seems to recoil sort of quicker and snappier, is what it feels like to me. This test really proves that there isn't actually really that much of a difference. I mean, it depends on your grip and what you're using and everything, but 1 inch, sometimes less than 1 inch recoil difference for the most part. So this isn't groundbreaking. This isn't telling probably most of you anything you didn't already know. But I wanted to do this video for one, to see how much of a difference there really is just to know. And I know now there isn't really that much of an actual muzzle rise difference in 45 versus 9mm. And also going forward, I could do this. Sorry, I got distracted by a cat. I could do this with other calibers. Tell me in the comments if you'd like to see me do this same sort of test with some other calibers to see what kind of a recoil impulse those have too. So once again, this test really wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't anything. It's not going to tell you anything you didn't already know. But for those of you that might be a bit more interested in sort of like data and numbers, kind of like I am, this test might be interesting to you because it tells you, I mean, visually, that the 45 recoils roughly in this test about 1 inch more, one little block more than the 9mm. Take that for what it's worth. It wasn't really much of a in-depth test, but there it is. If you enjoyed the video, you found it entertaining or informative, give me a like. I appreciate it. Tell me in the comments below what you thought of the test, but also if you want to see me do this with any other calibers, I don't really have much other calibers to actually do this test with, but if you want to see me do any others, tell me in the comments below. I might look into getting a handgun in that caliber to test it out. I'm the Car 131, signing off.